Hello and welcome to this interview with my good friend Tim from Data Content Reach. We're going to be talking today about digital strategy, about how to maximize your reach, but also talk about how digital strategy and marketing strategy can help you make a more functional independent media organization that achieves the effects that you want to achieve. So I'll get that frog out my throat and I'll bring in Tim to tell us, what is data content reach and what is digital strategy?
Cheers, Tom. Thanks for the intro. So I'm one bit of Data Content Reach, and we help not just media organizations, independent media organizations, but lots of different sort of third sector bodies and charities with their digital content strategies and other bits and bobs as well. So digital content strategies. So this is basically what to publish and how to publish it, simply put. So as the name suggests, we use lots of data to create great content, and then we push that content in certain ways to make sure we sort of maximize its value and reach as big an audience as possible. And that's ultimately how we help organizations.
Cool. So do you work at all with independent media? Because obviously I know that you have a background in independent media originally, and I know the other members of the team do as well. And what lessons do you think you can take from the work you've done around digital content marketing and strategy for independent media?
Yeah, so I was an editor at Ethical Consumer magazine for 7 or 8 years, and I still work with them as well. And at the moment, we're also working with Co-op News, helping them rebuild their web offering, and also with New Internationalist magazine, helping them to redefine what they're doing, basically. I won't talk about the specifics of their project, but I'll talk generally. So, I mean, the basis of everything that we do is data, and we collect data from like a variety of sources. So, for example, when we're looking to develop a content strategy, we're primarily, the first thing we look at is Google Analytics, right? Because there's an absolute wealth of information in there if you've got it set up correctly. So that's everything from page views to page value, and we can take all that information and see what your audience enjoys reading, basically, and what content that you've got and that you're already publishing is helping to create value for you or helping you reach your goals, your aim. And then we're also using other information like reader surveys, for example. So asking the readership what they're interested in, simple as that, and other questions that are helpful. So quite extensive reader surveys. And then we also use information from existing social media accounts. So we have a look at the stats from your Facebook account or your Twitter account or Instagram or whatever to see what's really resonating with your audience. So part of what we do is we have a look at like who your target audience is, because what often happens is with a lot of organizations is they haven't defined their market that well, and what they think is that everyone is going to be interested. It's vital what we're doing, everybody is interested. Well, the truth of the matter is there's going to be certain segments of the population that are interested in what you're doing, and it's about really targeting the segments that are actually interested in you. So one organization we're working with, for example, they were trying to target everybody, but it was really clear from the data that actually the people that were most interested were kind of women in their 40s. So what we've helped them to do is better target that audience, and we've really helped them improve conversions and the number of readers by being much more targeted. So helping people to define that audience is super important, and defining what it is that audience actually wants Like, what are they finding useful? What do they need? What do they want from you? That's super important, because then you can send them on a journey through your offering, whether, through your website, ultimately, but bringing them in from other channels and pushing them through your website. And it's creating a bit of a virtuous circle through that data, and using that to get a bit of a constant feedback loop and constantly evaluating what we're doing. But at the cornerstone of everything, is the content itself. So creating content that is going to resonate with that audience that you're looking to engage with. And so that's like, we use some other tools, basically search engine tools, to have a look at, when you're writing about a certain issue, how to write about it to best suit that audience, to bring traffic in. But also then when you're slicing and dicing it for other platforms like Twitter or Instagram, or making a video on it for YouTube or TikTok, how best to package that for the different platforms that you're pushing it out on.
Amazing.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, and that's super useful. It's the kind of strategic thinking that independent media often doesn't get to do, because we're so poorly resourced and we're time poor. And also, as you say, like, we do this because it's a passion and because we recognize it's important, usually to create a better world is what we're looking to do. And that's why, as you say, often we have that big idea that, well, everyone will be interested in this. Well, ideally, yeah, but
yeah.
To get to that point where you can build a sustainable organization where you can look after yourself and then improve and slowly but surely grow and reach more people, you need to do those things where you funnel in on it. And it's often funnel in on your audience. And one of the things I do with some people that I work with is create an audience persona. You sort of be able to talk about them as a character, so you get an idea in your head, but that you do all of this with brilliant data and stuff is amazing.
Yeah.
So
following on from that, I guess that's the other important thing with what we're doing. You hit the nail on the head, really. It's a dual thing. It's about mission, but also about making it sustainable. So we help people fulfill their mission, but we also help them, to bring in, whether it's donations or subscriptions. Like, we also help on that side of things, because it's equally as important as the mission. Because unless you're bringing in that revenue in whichever way it is, whether it's appealing to funders, big funding organizations, or going out with good content to your crowd, people who you're targeting for your crowdfunder, like, both those parts are vital, and you've got to find a way of, like, sensibly matching those two things up.
Yeah, well, actually, that's brilliant, because that brings me on to the next question, which is, what matters most for a healthy independent media outlet looking to become financially self-sufficient? Is it audience size, because that's often what people think, again, hit everyone, or is it audience engagement or other metrics? Like, what do you look at?
Yeah. I mean, I think the most important thing, is to have, like, really excellent content. I mean, that has got to be, like, the absolute basic thing. I mean, it doesn't matter. Nothing else matters if your content is rubbish. It doesn't matter what metric you're using. So, like, being strategic about what you're publishing is super important, because you've got to know that there's a demand for it. You've got to make it exciting and interesting. It's got to be well written, and you've got to a certain extent, you've got to play the game with Google as well, because a lot of people's traffic, it's going to come from search.
Right.
And so it's got to tick a lot of boxes. So that's the first thing that I would say. And so when it comes to that, like, the first thing that I'm looking at really is visits to the site. And now, whether that's coming from Google or it's coming from Facebook or Twitter or wherever, or who's engaging with your newsletter, visits is the first thing. And then from that, try and look at how those visitors are being funneled through to the secondary things, whether it's a call to action to write to your MP, or a call to action to donate, £5 a month. Ultimately, the first thing is driving traffic to those calls to action, driving traffic to your website, But once they're there, your content has got to be absolutely spot on, because otherwise people who've got the attention span of a gnat, right? Especially when they're online, and they will move off your site so quickly. So you've really got to grab them, you've really got to bring them in, and you've really got to help them through that journey on your site.
Yeah, hand holding. So
Yeah.
when independent media, this is a slightly tangential question, but just a thought.
Yeah.
When independent media are looking at creating content, you know, is there a sense in which that maybe some should slow down and create a little less, but a little bit more focused and refined content, because sometimes we're just like desperate to smash things out, you know, and like, especially when a story's so urgent, you know, is it better to maybe slow down and focus on those things, like you say, bringing the audience through the journey, making them really excited about every part of what you're giving them?
Yeah, I think there's space. I think there's space for the quick fire, the sort of the quick fire more bloggy type stuff. Absolutely. But if you really want to engage them, like, we find it's the long form content that is often best in terms of engaging readership and conversions,
Right.
rather than the short fire stuff. Like, if you started to use the shorter articles to really build up your audience, then it's slightly different. But ultimately, you know, it's that authority in whatever field that your unique selling point is in. Building content, good, strong cornerstone content around that, is what is going to get you eyeballs and conversions.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about social media now, because it's a way that I think most independent media think about reaching audiences.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 questions left, by the way, guys. So talking about going through that journey, stick with us through this journey. 3 more questions, and they're important. They're going to help you. What do you think the best platform is currently or permanently, really, for building an audience for crowdfunding, for subscription based, you know, independent media?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say, well, a few things, but I probably need to separate those 2 things out: subscriptions from crowdfunding, because I think they're potentially quite different. So I think the first thing to say is, actually, social media is important, but it's got to have a purpose. So I think when we're talking to people about social media, it's very much at the top of the funnel. So what you want to make sure it's being utilized correctly and driving people towards your content in some way. And again, it's content is king or queen again. And so you want to be using it to drive people to that content, and then pushing them to email, if you can do it before subscription, because you're going to get a much higher pickup rate on anything you do with people that are engaged on your email than you are on social media.
Yeah.
So I often use social media as a vehicle to drive people to an email newsletter.
Yeah. And that's
in terms of what's useful on social media, it depends, A, on your audience, and B, on what you're trying to achieve. So, for example, you might use Facebook, for example, to post like an album of really amazing images out of your last issue, and that's going to work phenomenally well on Facebook. Really beautiful images, or Instagram, right? But if you post those same images on Twitter, they're probably not going to get pick up in the same way, because people aren't using those platforms the same. So it's about slicing and dicing the content that you've got, whether it's in your magazine or on your website, for each platform, and it will be different. How you use that content on each platform will be different, and different platforms will be more useful for different things. So if you want to generate a bit of debate, go and say something controversial on Twitter, you know, and tag in some people who you know you can be slightly antagonistic with, and go and have that debate and generate it there. You know, you can't do that on LinkedIn, but what you can do on LinkedIn is go and do some really positive stuff, about some great organizations and get really good engagement there as well. So it's about using different platforms in different ways for different audiences. And what I would say is, when you're first defining that audience that we talked about at the beginning, think about what platforms they are using. So I use the example of the 40-year-old female, for example, with one publication. Think about what platform it is they are using and how they're using it, and then go and try and apply what you're doing, what your content is, what your context is to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And actually, just as a quick follow on, time poor independent media.
Yeah.
Would the suggestion be like kind of focus on the single platform that your ideal audience is on?
Yes.
If your time poor, it's 1 or 2 person band, 3 people maybe.
Yeah.
You don't have a social media marketing manager. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Even larger organizations, we've worked with an organization recently, and they tried to do too much, and they've got 6 social media accounts on different platforms. And we said to them, you don't need this. Let's figure out 3 that we can sensibly resource and use and focus on them. And we've actually cut down the number of platforms, but improved the content that is on the 3 that we're going to use. And that's really important. You don't have to be everywhere. You just have to do really well where you are.
Cool. Okay, last 2 questions, and they're all about the different platforms. In your opinion, is there any platform that you see when you're out there that is being underused by independent media, and what do you think they should do on it? Because I've got I've got a couple of opinions, but I want to hear yours.
What is underused? I don't know. It's a good question. Like, I have to say, I'd quite like to experiment with using WhatsApp a bit more to deliver sort of more targeted notifications about content. And that's something I haven't done, and I don't get it from anybody else. But I know that there's a lot of all like non-publishing organizations that do, and businesses that do use it. And I'd quite like to experiment with that, because I think you could probably have like some interesting conversations on that platform that I've never experimented with.
Interesting. I've actually noticed recently that a lot of, especially when it's around like international relations or foreign policy stuff, they've all got Telegram channels.
Some good one. Yeah.
And that can be one to many.
Activist groups have started using Telegram, haven't they, as well?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And recently, I'll just drop this on. Like, I've been in a chat with the Neon Communications Network, and loads of the third sector are about to this autumn move on to TickTock, which I think is going to be very interesting, because maybe independent media should be there a lot more as well. I also don't think American independent media is very heavily on Reddit, but I don't think British independent media is very much on Reddit. So these are a couple of things I've noticed. And
Reddit's an interesting one, because I've always sort of steered away from it, because like they can smell a rat at at 500 miles, and if you're not already part of that community, and you start talking about something as though you're not necessarily directly associated with it, they'll out you straight away. I think you've got to have a really smart strategy for getting into Reddit, or you've got to have like one of your editors already's got not a following, but already got an account and is regularly part of that community, I think.
Yeah, I think there's potentially a strategy to come up with there, but you do see like Americans have entire subreddits dedicated to independent media, or like a specific channel. It might be, I don't know, the Jimmy Dore with the Young Turks or stuff like that, and people are openly debating. And I just feel like there's some quality independent media that's done. Something that the IMA might work on, which is building a subreddit that we have a couple of people who genuinely are part of the community that works on it, and then you can post there and hopefully kick off discussion and debate. But this is something we're thinking about. Okay, last question. What are your top tips for independent media who've got very limited time and budget for all the key platforms for each one? So like, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and email.
Okay, Twitter. So I think with Twitter, it's like you have to be quite bold. You know,
Yeah.
don't worry about controversy, and don't worry about debate. I think people get very like protective or defensive, especially once they've built up a bit of an audience. Like they get a bit cagey. It's like, oh, I'm not sure what I should say now because like I've got a lot of followers. And but I think you've got to be bold when you're engaging on Twitter. Don't be afraid of putting out your editorial opinion, and not just like, you know, push notifications of articles. Like be bold with what you say. I think
Yeah.
that's important for Twitter. I think with Facebook, like for me, I think again it's about generating debate, but I think it's more there. It's more about asking your audience what they think. You know, what's worked well for us in the past, with ethical consumer, for example, is just posing them a question. Like just pose really simple questions to the audience, like what do you think of such and such a thing? How do you do such and such a thing? How do you go about such and such a thing? What do you recommend? Like ask them questions, and immediately you get debate and you get engagement. I think that's the one. YouTube is one that I'm starting to work on at the moment. Been writing some scripts for. I think with that, it's all about production values.
Yeah.
And I think if you get that wrong, you're not going to get anything. You know, you've got to have your decent product. People have a certain level of expectation now, and I think you've really got to work hard to meet it.
Yeah, I think for independent media, anyone that's looking at YouTube, you can't just slap stuff up, you know, or like, oh, we did this event and here's a round table or whatever. No, you know, it's not that place. It's a really, if you ever transition to YouTube, it's a really considered strategy. You've got to have high production values and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I'd agree. Yeah, totally. Instagram, it's going through some turmoil, isn't it? It's really struggling as a platform. It doesn't know what it is any longer, does it?
I just find I have to say I find Instagram a bit bland, and it would be like down my list on what people should use. That's my opinion. I don't know. I know it might not be very helpful, but
no, I tend to agree, and I think Facebook and Instagram are both struggling. As you know, they could go the way of MySpace. Genuinely, like they really could. Like people think that's a little bit cataclysmic, but they really lost what they are. But Facebook probably has for news and media still more value than Instagram, which never really quite was the space to get news and media anyways, was it? And now really has lost that. What about
well, depending on your audience, like it tends to have slightly older demographic, so it's useful in reaching, you know, your over 40s basically, who still live on that and who've got higher disposable income if you're looking for you know, subscriptions or whatever. Yeah, which we all need.
Yeah, we need to eat. What about email? Should people try and do things through Substack or some hosting platform, or should they have their own email list? What do you reckon?
Yeah, own email list. Probably, like I use MailChimp a lot. It's super simple. It's got decent you can it's got decent you can use it's I'll get my words out in a second. Sorry, first one. That's the first time that I've sort of lost it.
No, you've done well to
now. Yeah, it's got decent functionality. Basically, there's lots you can do with it, but it's still quite simple. And it does a lot of there's some great the automation tools, for example, are really simple. And if you can build those into your processes so that stuff's automated, makes things a lot easier. But regular email news updates, even if they're only short, will be the best thing that you do.
Right, yeah, foundation of this stuff. And last little bits, anything on TikTok or any of the other platforms that you like? I think we've covered most of them, but yeah.
TikTok, I'll be honest with you, I've never really used professionally. Like I keep looking at it to have a look at how could this work? How could that work? But at the moment, partly because the audiences that I'm targeting are a bit older. It's not really the right place for me. So I don't have an opinion on TikTok.
Cool. Well, you can check out the IMA's previous workshop with TikTok superstar and communication secretary of the IMA, Claudia Fior. In our previous, it's unlisted on our YouTube channel, so you can get in touch with me, thomas@ima.press. Data Content Reach are members of the IMA, so you can again get in contact with them through me, thomas@ima.press. Loads of like really useful stuff in a short space of time, good overview there. And I think, you know, especially in a world, if you are building your audience and your income stream around things like Facebook, and the world's changing, learning how to better drive traffic to your site, better maximize what you're doing, maybe focus a little bit, those things will be super useful. And you can always come to myself, and ideally, hopefully in the future, someone from Data Content Reach for advice and support and proper consultancy. Not for me, I'm not the proper consultant, I'm just a guy here chatting stuff, but paying as much attention as I can and learning as much as I can from experts like Tim. So thanks so much, Tim. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with, the IMA members, bearing in mind our audience is going to be about 50 or 60 people who reach a total, by the way, of 8.5 million people, which is a pretty amazing thing. So well done, all the independent media outlets that are doing that work.
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's always a pleasure chatting to you, Tom, and hopefully I get to meet some more members of the organisation at some point soon, and we can see how maybe we can work collaboratively on any projects.
Brilliant. Yeah. And just actually, I'll end on this point. The IMA is hiring a new member of staff who's going to be working specifically on collaborations and campaigns, bringing members together, running events where we see each other, but also running projects that bring us all together so that we can work together. So hopefully that will include you and any and all of the members sometime soon. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time we do something really cool. Cool. I'll catch you then.